if you will, the advertisers and brand side, I do think that we as an ecosystem can basically make that transparent to them. I mean, we got an order last week for a very large order, and they wanted male iPhone users. And when you think about it, you go, what are they really trying to buy here? What is, you could tell that was a buyer who really didn't know what they were thinking about. It really should be more about, you know, what is the audience, who you're trying to reach, and kind of let the ecosystem figure out whether it's an iPhone user or not. But we actually got an order for males this age iPhone. So there's a long way to go. But on the buy side, we will be able to hide it. On the kind of the rest of the ecosystem, I believe there will always be mobile components of that ecosystem that are unique because it is so different from online. And what we're seeing is a classic evolution of any text-based ecosystem is, in the early days, the Quattros of the world, the Jump Taps had to have very kind of broad tech stacks that kind of did everything for everybody because there were no mobile websites. So if you wanted to do advertising on a mobile website, you had to build a mobile website for the customer and then do advertising on them. Well, those days are kind of gone. Now you have companies like Medialets that specialize very, very well with very deep tech. And so you got kind of not splintering, but kind of breaking up the ecosystem in individual pieces of tech.
Yeah.
And you'll get kind of aberrations where some of them will kind of move back a little bit, but over time, you'll have a very well-defined ecosystem. Right now, it's anything but. And it's still very much, you know, it's like if you want to live and work in an exciting environment, then go into mobile advertising, because every month you don't know where you are in the ecosystem. But it will stabilize, and it will, in my opinion, get very specialized in terms of kind of deep, narrow tech stacks with services sitting on top. And it will get to the point where we won't be getting orders for, you know, males 13 to whatever on iPhone.
I'd add. I mean, I think that's a good point as to where we are right now. You know, there's you know, there's so many different digital channels now. You know, I mean, local response is probably the coolest last one I've come to believe in the last couple of months. But it's like, how do you actually make all this stuff cohere together, right? Because at the end of the day, you're, you know, for advertising, you're one brand. You're trying to engage with one consumer through, like, you know, 1,000 splintered channels. So I think from the buyer perspective, there's a lot of there's a philosophical urge for integrating the budgets again and the thinking. Having said that, you have to actually sort of pursue each of these fragments individually to really understand what it does. You know, so I think, you know, the idea of convergence is a real idea that we'll start to hear more about, but I think it's kind of a 5-year trend where things start to get reintegrated around the data from the consumer, which is really sort of what allows you to sort of put some coherent logic together to invest money across, you know, N media channels and, you know, Y, you know, kinds of mechanics to actually reach a marketing objective. The other thing I'd say for investors or for people who are, you know, make money, you know, or entrepreneurs from being between an advertiser and a publisher, you know, there's a broad trend going on in digital advertising which shows every sign of going from PC display to mobile to video to, you know, social to everything, and that is the sort of refactoring of the middleman chain between the advertiser and the publisher. We in digital media, you know, the prevailing business model has been the ad network, and that's when everything's new. An ad network has a lot of know-how and a little bit of technology and a lot of brokers and sellers, and you know, sort of broker out a market. As the markets mature, the market participants tend to look at the middleman and say, you're taking too much out of the transaction for a value that's diminishing, because we all know how to do this now. The pricing's open. And that trend is very much playing out. It's refactoring the whole sort of advertising technology stack. DSPs, ad exchanges, that's a very real phenomena online. And at least from our perspective, there's a big desire to sort of bring some of that same simplicity and cutting out of the middleman into the new mediums like mobile.
Good. So, Nihal, let's talk about local. The holy grail. Is it, in fact, the holy grail of mobile?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this now, I think, for 12 years. You know, you walk by Starbucks, right, and you get an ad on your phone. I think there's a lot of ways that people are actually seeing scale there now, right? You can sign up through your carrier, through AT&T, with a platform called Placecast, and they do cell triangulation or cell ID identification and send you an SMS from advertisers that sign up. You can do it with Shopkick, right, where you download an app to your iPhone and you walk into a Target or a Best Buy that has installed high-frequency audio transmitters to actually get and unlock, you know, points and play a game while you're inside the store. I think for, and obviously Foursquare and Gowalla and Brightcut and Looped and Whirl, and the list goes on and on, right? Our kind of thesis is that people are doing this a lot. They're actually participating in this fragmentation. They're also publicly posting more than ever on Twitter and Facebook. And marketers can now actually accurately target people based on knowing where they are, based on all this public data. Right, 160 million plus tweets a day. We tell Twitter that we think 8 or 9% of those tweets are actually tied to a specific location. Not only because there's a lat-long geocode in the actual tweet, but because there's a POI or an actual location that's mentioned. You'd be surprised if you go to search.twitter.com and actually just type in, "I'm at Walmart," and I implore you guys to do this, you'll see thousands of tweets a day, right, of people. Apparently, I was born in Iowa. This is what you do in Iowa, right? Like, you go to Walmart, and
Well, not only do you go, but you tell people you went.
and you want to tell people you went. But it's absolutely insane, right? And so people are doing this more than ever. And why we love that medium is this data is public. You don't need to download an app. You don't need to sign up with a service. You don't need to sign up with a carrier. You're just publicly posting this data. Now we're going to start seeing direct response, mediums, which was mentioned on this panel, sort of the first advertisers that are emerging to respond to this public data. So that's our approach at Local Response. Don't want to sound too promotional there, but there's a lot of companies attacking this space, the convergence of mobile, social, local. We've been talking about it for a long time. The big difference now is that it's finally here. There's finally scale.
Yeah.
Well, and then local also is apps. We launched a company a couple weeks ago, launched today in Las Vegas, called Hotels Tonight. You go to Hotel Tonight, and it shows you 3 hotels in New York that you can get for a cheap price for tonight. And it, based on where you are in New York, it shows you whether, if you're down in Tribeca, it'll show you hotels here. If you're up in Midtown, it'll show you hotels there. So using location, using direct response, and is it advertising? Is it an app? It's somewhere in between as you get all this data.
Yeah. We've always said an ad that's so targeted. I think I stole this from Mike Baker like 7 years ago. Content or an ad that's so targeted becomes content.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting to give valuable content to the consumer.
So does the consumer get more worried about the big man watching over, right? The Apples and Googles being able to follow you wherever you go? I mean, do you think that becomes a real issue like privacy has in the online world?
1% of consumers care. 99% of consumers say the benefits are so great. I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care. They don't know that it's probably not so good for them. But the fact is, they're letting their locations be known.
Yeah.
And the fact is that for a lot of the applications to work effectively, they need to know the location. So the issue with the Apple thing was really that they were caching it for a longer period than they needed to. It wasn't that it was telling the location, because they tell you that when you first turn on the phone. They tell you can turn it off. The marquee committee had all seen all that last summer, way before this broke. The issue was that it's that kind of silly to leave it unencrypted sitting on the phone.
Yeah.
And there's, Verizon puts stickers now, right, on the backs of the phones. I think the government probably on the fronts of the phones, front and back. So it's wrapped actually in a big. I think the government probably will step in at some point, and like when you post something publicly, like 14% of Facebook status messages are actually public by default. Right? When you sign up to Facebook today, when you post something on status, somebody can read that. And I think some of these companies are going to be forced to say, like literally have a double opt-in, like we have in the permission-based SMS space. That by posting this message or by clicking this button on your phone, you're actually posting this publicly, and this data can be used for any whatever reason. I think there'll be a standard for that soon. It used to be.
So, question for Larry and Shivan. So, I moderated a panel on measurement, on online measurement, about a month ago, and I walked away depressed, as I told you last night at dinner, because basically the message was from these panelists was, despite the fact that there's all this great online data about what John's doing, what John likes, what he buys, we really need to get those online guys to go back and put that into the male 18 to 49 bucket, because after all, that's the way people have bought advertising, and that's the way people have measured as advertising forever, and that's the way we're going to always continue, despite the fact that there's all this more data out here. If you think about the kind of data that you get online, and then you think about the kind of data that you can get in mobile. I mean, mobile is like online on steroids. So where are we, and how are we going to start to measure this, and what's the role of, is it going to be a closed system, open system? Pick any poison that you like around this topic.
Sure.
I think it's we could spend a whole other panel on it, but love to hear. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit about just a few broad categories. So in terms of if you're on a mobile web browser, right? Any of the publishers have implemented sort of site-centric tags. If they're accessing your site through mobile web devices, they already know. So actually, there's some publishers, I think the Weather Channel, who will say, we have almost 50%, or 30 to 50% of our traffic is now coming from mobile devices, right?
It's now more mobile.
It's actually
than it is
more
online.
mobile than it is online. So there is that sort of web analytics data that you can already use for mobile web. And then you come to sort of, well, that's good, but what are you doing on the device? And so we're actually building sort of software and technology to, the traditional panel base where somebody opts in because, we're measuring everything, so we're very transparent about what you do. And, for Android, you can build apps, and there are apps. It's not us. There are a lot of people who do that, who can actually measure sort of all of your activity on the phone. And then you have Apple, which is a closed system. And by closed, I mean they're very particular about what applications have access to certain APIs to run in the background. They're limited to video and actually just streaming music and certain kinds of applications. So, doing holistic device measurement on Apple is still a challenge. But we've built some technology there. It's not an application, but it's server-based where you route traffic to a proxy server, and we basically can determine what's going on. Then if you step outside of that, I mean, what Flurry and there are some other companies have done is, I really want to understand all of the events within an application, right? So today, there is no API on Android or the iOS platform that can allow anybody to really understand what's going on inside the app, right? So that's all custom implementation. So that's where a lot of the app analytics companies, Flurry being one of them, there are a few in the space who said, deploy our SDK and we can tell you what's going on. So that's app-specific analytics. I think, but if you're a big gaming company, right, if you have 7 or 10 different apps, well, it's good to have view across one app. You want to have view across all of the apps, right? So I think the next step in terms of application measurement, I think a lot of companies will move to that, where they're measuring everything across their portfolio of applications. I think at some point you really want somebody to say, here's what's going on here's general usage on the application, but here's what people are doing within those applications. Right. That doesn't exist today. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where sort of this will evolve from a measurement perspective. So that's just general usage device stuff, right? Then you think about advertising measurement. I think there the challenge has been for web, it was easy. You have cookies, you tag, the tag fired. You can relate how many impressions you delivered and correlate sort of the audiences you delivered to. Come to the mobile world, well, generally, at least a lot of third-party cookies on the Apple platform are disabled by default. So you have a little bit of challenge there. And then those cookies don't translate really well across mobile web and mobile applications. So if I'm on the mobile web browser, I was exposed to an ad, then I switch to an app. Well, you can't tell, is this the same? I mean, there's a lot of triangulation happening in the background with UDIDs and people trying to match this. So there are efforts there, but I'm not aware of anybody who's perfected that. And I think that's a challenge if you want to measure a campaign across apps and devices, right? and applications. So that's what I think sort of the landscape looks like, and for advertising to be real in scale and scale in this platform, I think having sort of third-party measurement, reliable third-party measurement across these devices is going to be really, really important.
Measurement's one thing, but targeting is another. The targeting is happening. So, I mean, we 33 across targets on the web with a lot of, and you can buy males 18 to 35 with an auto buying intent in the last 2 weeks, right? You can target, that's how you buy. And that's how advertisers want to buy. Mm-hmm. And if it weren't for the privacy concerns, they can say, and by the way, that guy's now on his phone looking at the web because the UDID or email address correlates to what we had, and we'll anonymize it, but we're still a little scared about using it because, but you do know it, and it's there, and it's findable, and you know exactly who the user is. I mean, the phone number or the UDID is there, and it's better than a cookie. Yeah. I mean, it's you can't destroy it. So the only issue is, how do we deal with the privacy issue of keeping that to use for targeting purposes?
Yep. In a lot of applications, I don't know if we've noticed in some of the data, UDID is actually transferred in clear text.